Welcome to the Cherry Creek Schools HBCU, HSI, and NASI Virtual College Fair. Thank you for joining us. A few housekeeping announcements before we get started. You can use the Q&A button on your screen to type your question to our presenters at any time. Your camera microphone are off, so the panelists cannot see or hear you. This is one of many different sessions happening, so be sure to sign up for additional sessions. This presentation is being recorded and will be available within a few days at drivescan.com/Cherry Creek. Now I'll turn it over to our presenters.
Hi everyone, my name is Brianna Gomez. I'm an undergraduate financial aid counselor at California Lutheran University. We are located in Thousand Oaks, California, right in between LA and Santa Barbara off the 101. So beautiful place in Southern California. When you are looking for colleges, don't forget our school. I'm also here with another financial aid counselor, Kathy Palmer, who is going to be assisting me in all the questions that you have. Please feel free to ask as many questions as you do have, because obviously financial aid is something that is pretty difficult for a lot of people to understand. It's still difficult for Kathy and I. We ask each other questions all the time about it. So it's always better to ask and for us to try and get that answer for you. And it's also better for the other audience members as well. We are going over quite a bit of information today, but we will have time at the end to answer any questions that you have. So today we'll be going over the process of financial aid, the application itself and different applications available, understanding college costs and how much you'll actually be paying for college, types of financial aid available for students, and then of course any questions that you have. So kind of an overview of what financial aid is. Financial aid is designed to bridge the gap between what a college actually costs and what you and your family can afford. However, families should expect to pay a portion of the student's college costs. So the government's convention of financial aid is that it's to the extent to which they're able to help you bridge the gap between what it costs and what you can afford. However, they do see that the primary responsibility to pay is on the family to pay for a dependent child's education. Students also have a responsibility to contribute towards their education. So whatever income they put in their financial aid application is also considered as something that they should contribute as well. So some important dates to remember. I know we have students here who might be freshmen in high school and some who might be seniors getting ready to start college this fall. Every year, the FAFSA, the California Dream application, and the CASFA, the Colorado application for state financial aid, all open on October 1st. So that gives you plenty of time to really take your time with the application and get it in before the deadline. So you will want to complete one of these applications. So the FAFSA is for US citizens and permanent residents. And then the California Dream application and the CASFA, those are for students who are not US citizens or permanent residents and are ineligible for the FAFSA. I know the California Dream application is supposed to be designed for California students, but if you are going to a California school, we do encourage dreamers from other states to still complete the California Dream application. So we have similar information to help determine what kind of financial aid you might be eligible for. You will have to answer in the Dream application that you're a California resident, but you'll still put down the high school that you're graduating from in Colorado, and you won't qualify for our California state aid, but we will use this application to determine if you qualify for any institutional aid that the school might be able to offer. And then the FAFSA deadline does differ based on the college you're applying to. So I know that in Colorado, you guys don't have a hard deadline on the FAFSA. It does say to check with the financial aid office of the school that you're applying to. So it is really important to check the financial aid office's website on the schools that you're applying to see when their FAFSA or CAFA application is due to make sure you're getting that done on time. If you do want to apply to a school in California, the California Dream Act application is due by March 2nd. Again, that's an application for schools in California if you are not eligible to complete the FAFSA, and you might identify as a Dreamer or DACA student. But it is important to ask all the colleges that you're applying to what other forms or types of applications that they require for financial aid, and to make sure that you're turning those financial aid applications in by the deadline. So one of the additional secondary financial aid applications is the CSS Profile. It is in addition to the FAFSA, but not all colleges require it. So the financial aid, this application is a service of College Board, and it's available only online. Again, this application also opens on October 1st each year, and the university that you're applying to should let you know if this is another required form or financial aid application that they require you to submit. Now, the FAFSA is a free application, so when you are filling out the FAFSA, you should never be expected to pay for that. The CSS Profile is a financial aid application that you do have to pay for, so it's $25 for the initial application to send it to one school, and then $16 for each additional school you want to send the CSS Profile to. So just an example of some of the 200 schools that use the CSS Profile are USC, Stanford, Scripps, Caltech, Occidental, Westmont, Duke, Princeton, among others. So again, it's really important to check those financial aid websites of the colleges that you're applying to see what forms of financial aid applications that they require, and to make sure you complete those on time. So the Colorado application for state financial aid is a safe and easy way to apply for state financial aid if you're a Colorado asset student, so advancing students for a stronger tomorrow, or a DACA student. The requirements to complete this application are if you're a non-US citizen resident or a non-resident student. You do have to reside in Colorado for at least 3 years before graduating from a Colorado high school or passing a high school equivalency exam. And you must be admitted to a participating college within 12 months of graduating high school. However, if you are eligible for federal aid, you should be completing the FAFSA. So it's either one or the other. You either apply for the CASFA or you apply for the FAFSA. Again, the CASFA is for non-US citizen students, and the FAFSA is for students who are US citizens and residents. So the FAFSA application, as I mentioned, free application for federal student aid. You should not have to pay for the FAFSA when you're completing it. So if they do ask you for a payment, you're probably on the wrong website. It is located at studentaid.gov. So the federal government has put all the student aid information onto one website so you can access it easily. And this is where the FAFSA is located. The FAFSA will collect demographic and financial information about the student and their family, and it takes all this information about your demographic information, the number of people in your household, the number of students in college in your household, your income, your parents' income, among other questions. And it takes all this information and it calculates an expected family contribution, otherwise known as the EFC. And this EFC is the same at every single school that you go to. So this EFC sticks with you nationwide. And the EFC is a measure of your family's financial strength. So we use this EFC, and every college uses this EFC to calculate the amount of federal student aid you're eligible to receive, as well as other forms of financial aid as well. So when you're filling out the FAFSA, I would argue that this is one of the most difficult parts of the FAFSA, which is creating your FSA ID and password. They want you to have a really strong password since you're putting sensitive information in the FAFSA application, your social security number, your tax information. So they really want families to have a secure login for this so nobody can access this information. But in many of the conversations I have with students and parents, this is always the hardest part, is them remembering their FSA ID, not being able to log back in to make a correction or to view something on their FAFSA. So when you do create your FSA ID, please make sure to write down your username and password and any other information related to the FSA ID. So it's always handy in case you need to get back into your FAFSA application. So the FAFSA is located online, as I said, on studentaid.gov. There are other forms of it. There is a paper FAFSA. You can call in and say all your answers over the phone. There's also an app available. I think Kathy and I would argue the easiest way to do it is to complete it online at studentaid.gov. And these are some of the reasons why. So there are built-in edits to prevent costly errors. So it will give you little error notifications. Maybe if you're missing, if you skipped a question or answered a question a little funky, that maybe they assume that you made an error on it. So they do have those built-in edits for you. And they also have skip logic. So it helps the student and parent skip unnecessary questions that you don't need to answer. It is probably the most timely submission of the application and any corrections after. So for example, at our school, if you were to make a correction online, we usually get it within a week. Whereas if you do a paper FAFSA, that can sometimes take weeks to process. So it's just best to fill it out online. My favorite feature about it is that there's these little help icons next to every single question on the FAFSA. So if you need a little more information or a little more direction as to what question you're answering, there are these help icons that give more detail to the question being asked of you. It gives examples. Sometimes it gives photos of where you're supposed to find information. So I find that really helpful when filling out the FAFSA and when directing students and parents. There's also the ability to check your application status online. And it's just a simplified application process for the future. So you can renew your FAFSA each year, and it keeps all the information stored in there for you, so like some of the demographic information that wouldn't change from year to year. So I would strongly recommend completing the FAFSA online. So for those of you who are getting ready to go to college this fall, and you may have already completed your FAFSA or you're getting ready to complete your FAFSA, these are some highlights about the upcoming 2021-22 FAFSA for this upcoming academic year. It was made available on October 1st, but it is still open if you still need to complete it. It will ask you and your parents for tax information from 2 years prior. So this is not a mistake that it's asking you for information from 2 years prior. This is actually done purposefully because the Department of Education and many financial aid administrators were having problems with requesting information from just the year before, as many families didn't have their tax information available yet from the prior year. They might have filed extensions, so then they really didn't have any of their tax information available when completing the FAFSA. So the easiest way for all of us to deal with this was to just go back 2 years to your tax returns from 2 years ago. So if you are getting ready to complete a 2021-2022 FAFSA, it is going to ask you for your 2019 federal tax return information. Because all these taxes have already been filed 2 years ago, they have this really handy feature called the IRS data retrieval tool that's available to use. Some people are ineligible to use it, but if you are filling out the FAFSA and you indicate that you want to use the data retrieval tool and it does say that you're eligible to use it, I can't recommend enough. Please use it. It makes it so much easier for you and the student. It makes it easier for us financial administrators because basically it just pulls all your IRS tax information straight from the IRS website and puts it into your FAFSA for you. So it does all the work for you, so you don't have to sit there with your taxes and look for certain line items and try to put it in the FAFSA. They have created additional security measures in place to protect your information. So I'm going to show you on next couple slides what it looks like when you get to the FAFSA. And it does come to the data retrieval tool section, so you can be prepared when you do get to that section what it's going to look like. Just another note, there are some big changes coming to the FAFSA within the next couple of years. So they are changing some of the questions on it. They're trying to simplify the process and make it easier for students and parents to understand the terminology. And we're going to go over a little more of that information later. But just wanted to let you know, for those of you who are not seniors yet, that there will be changes coming to the FAFSA within the next couple of years. Okay, so when you get to the financial information section, so we'll show you at the top. So this is a screenshot from a FAFSA from a couple years ago, but it will say, attention, you must provide financial information for your parents' 2019 tax return. If you indicate that you've already completed it, you just have to select how your parents' tax filing status is. If you're a student and you filed taxes 2 years ago, you also have the option to use this feature as well in the student financial information section. And then as long as your parents didn't complete a foreign tax return and they meet the eligibility requirements, it should link them to the IRS data retrieval tool. Some of the pros, again, about using this tool is that about a third of all FAFSAs are selected for this federal process called verification, where us financial aid administrators have to make sure that the information you put on your FAFSA is true and accurate. So sometimes we have to collect tax return information from parents and students to verify this information. However, if you use the data retrieval tool, we don't have to ask you for your taxes. You don't have to go through the headache of looking for them and submitting them to us. And we don't have to go through the headache of reading through your taxes and making sure every line matches every line on the FAFSA. So it's easier for all of us if you just link all the information right from the IRS. It can also prevent some pretty big mistakes that we do see students and parents make sometimes when they put that they're, that they paid way more in income tax than they actually did. And making these kinds of mistakes in the, especially in the financial section, it can really change your eligibility for financial aid. So you could hurt your eligibility for getting more financial aid, or if you get selected for verification, you can get financial aid taken away from you. So it's really important to really pay attention on this section, even if you aren't eligible to use that IRS data retrieval tool, or if you decide you just don't want to use it. It's really imperative that you do your best to provide the most accurate information possible using your taxes from 2 years prior. So if you elect to use the data retrieval tool, so on the right, the left side of your screen, it does show the parent login information. So the parents also have to create an FSA ID, and it will ask the parent to use their FSA ID to log in prior to using the data retrieval tool. This is an added security measure to make sure that for whatever reason, if someone had access to the student's FSA ID to log into their FAFSA, that they couldn't get into your tax information from the IRS. So this is an added security measure. It makes the parents log in again using their FSA ID. And then on the right side, it gives you a warning page that you are getting taken off the FAFSA website and being directed to the IRS site. So it gives you that warning. This is how it's supposed to go. This is the process for it. So you're going to go ahead and click proceed to the IRS site. On the IRS site, they do ask you for a little more information to verify your identity. And then once you input that information, as long as all the information you put on the IRS website exactly matches your tax returns from 2 years ago, then it will allow you to link the information to the FAFSA. Your address has to be exactly the same as it was 2 years ago. So it is really important that that you make sure on your 2019 taxes that you're using the same address that you're putting on the IRS data retrieval tool. And once it does let you link the information, it will let you know that the tax information has been successfully linked, but it will not show you any dollar amounts of the tax return. Again, this is a security measure. So if someone were able to access the student's FAFSA, that it does not show any of your tax information that was linked from the IRS. So it won't show you the any dollar amounts for your adjusted gross income or income tax. It's just going to say that it was transferred from the IRS, and that's how you'll know that it transferred successfully. As I mentioned before, I've never used this feature or checked it out. I really should, because it seems like they've made a ton of improvements to the student experience as far as financial aid goes. One of them being that they have an app now that you can download on your phone to do the FAFSA on your iPhone, which I think is pretty cool, because now there's not an excuse that you need more time to do it. You can do it on your phone at any time, including make corrections if you're asked to make corrections to your FAFSA. So this is just another way of making it more accessible for students to be able to complete their FAFSA. So one question that we get a lot from students is about their dependency status. A lot of students tell me that they are financially supporting themselves, that their parents are not paying for their college, that they are paying for their college on their own. But the Department of Education is extremely strict on who they deem as a dependent student versus an independent student. And these are the set of questions that they use in the application to determine if a student is a dependent or independent. So it's a little small, but it says, this is straight from the FAFSA, it says, if you can answer no to all the following questions, you are considered a dependent student and your parents must provide financial information. If you can answer yes to one of the questions, then you are an independent student. And to give you an idea, some of the questions are you married? Were you born before January 1st, 1998? So that would mean that you are 24, or you're going to be 24 during the year that you're going to school. Students who are veterans of the armed forces or serving active duty. If you were in foster care or a ward of the court or emancipated minor before the time you were 18. Students who are homeless or in housing transition programs. So these are the kinds of questions that it asks. And usually my answer for most of these students is you have to put your parents' information, even if your parents are not paying for your college. I was in that situation too. My parents didn't pay for my school, but I still had to put my parents' information and their tax information in the FAFSA, which, you know, it's hard on the student if you're paying for college on your own, but this is just the federal regulation that we're required to follow. Under very limited circumstances, such that like your parents are incarcerated, or you had to leave the home due to an abusive family environment, or you can't locate your parents, those are usually the only times where after you get through this set of questions, it does give you the option to not put your parents' information. But if you don't put your parents' information and you didn't answer yes to one of these questions, your FAFSA will reject, and you have to reach out to the financial aid office to basically submit some type of appeal or explain to them why you should be considered an independent student. These are very, very limited circumstances that we allow it. It's something at Cal Lutheran, we have an appeals committee that reviews these kind of cases. So it's pretty hard to get around to not have your parents and their tax information listed on your FAFSA. So some reminders, the data is sent to all schools that are listed on your FAFSA, your California DREAM application, or your CASFA application. I know on the FAFSA and DREAM application, you can list up to 10 students at a time, or sorry, 10 schools at a time. So if you're applying to more than 10 schools, you have to put the 10 schools that you want to apply to first, submit the FAFSA, then go back into your FAFSA, take off some schools, put some new schools on, and resubmit it again. At the end, when you finish the application, it produces a student aid report, or a SAR. Once the application is submitted, that gives you a summary of all the answers to the questions that all of your answers, so you can review the information for accuracy. It also tells you what your EFC is. If there were any errors that they noticed on the FAFSA. If your FAFSA was selected for verifications, there are comments on the SAR report, so you should check out that report after you submit the application. Another reminder, you do have to do a new financial aid application every single year because we have to get updated tax information and re-review your eligibility for need-based aid. So because the information on the FAFSA is asking for your tax returns from 2 years prior, we understand that a lot can happen in 2 years, especially with everything that just went on in the past year during the COVID-19 pandemic. A lot of people lost their businesses, were laid off from their jobs, or let go from jobs that they were at a long time ago. And your family's financial situation now may be extremely different than what it was 2 years ago. On the actual FAFSA, the first time you submit it, you are required to put that tax information from 2 years ago. But if you want to, if you want your newer income information considered in the calculation of your financial aid, you can contact the financial aid office to determine the institution's policy on applying for a special circumstance. Some places call it a professional judgment, and it may require you to submit some written explanation and additional documentation so we can get a better understanding of where your financial situation is at now, and see if we can replace the information on the FAFSA with more accurate and up-to-date information. So some of the reasons you might submit a special circumstance appeal are change in employment, medical expenses that are out of pocket and not covered by insurance, death of a parent, divorce or separation, or like I mentioned earlier, if the student cannot obtain parent information on their FAFSA. So once you do get your FAFSA or your CASPA or your California Dream application submitted, this is how we determine how much financial aid you are actually eligible for. So the cost of attendance minus the EFC that your financial aid application produces equals your financial need. It's really important to remember that the cost of attendance at every school is different. So your financial need from school to school might look very different, even though your EFC is the same at every single school. Also, a lot of colleges have different abilities to meet your financial needs. So they may not be able to meet your full financial need. It all depends on the school and the kind of institutional aid they have to offer. In determining how much it's actually going to cost you to pay for college, there is a gross cost, usually the cost of attendance, that tells you how much they charge you for tuition, room and board, books, how much they estimate for books and supplies and transportation. You take that gross cost of maybe tuition and fees and room and board, subtract the financial aid awards, so your scholarships, grants, and loans, and that gives you the net cost to attend, and that's how much you actually have to pay out of pocket or maybe take out in a loan to pay for school. So sources of financial aid available, so it can come from the federal government, which is the largest source of financial aid, and that does require you to complete a FAFSA. States have their own form of financial aid. So that would be the CASPA application, but it does depend on the state. So it's important to check with those financial aid offices specifically of the schools that you're applying to. And then colleges and universities might have their own form of institutional aid, such as merit or academic scholarships. And then some of us also have need-based awards. So here at CLU, we also have the ability to offer grant assistance that comes through university dollars, even if you might not qualify for federal or state financial aid. There are also private sources like outside scholarships and outside loans. And if you're applying for outside scholarships, those can add up really quickly. So those are the 4 forms of financial aid available. So grants are money that you don't have to pay back to the school. So coming from the federal aid side of things, there's the federal Pell Grant. And for this upcoming year, the maximum amount of the federal Pell Grant that you could possibly receive is $6,495. There's also a federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant, or the FSCOG, and that can vary in amounts from school to school. There are also institutional grants available. Again, that does depend on their school and their ability to provide institutional grants. And then the Colorado state grants that are available through the CASPA. So obviously, I'm sure you're all trying to get as many scholarship and grant dollars as you can, but it is important to note that loans are a form of financial aid and they are a resource that are available to students to use. So if you are eligible to complete a FAFSA, that means you are eligible for federal direct student loans. The two types of student loans available are the subsidized loan and unsubsidized loan. So the subsidized loan is need-based, so you may or may not qualify for it based off your FAFSA application. But the difference between the two is that with the subsidized loan, the government pays the interest while the student is attending school at least half time, whereas the student is expected to pay all the interest on the unsubsidized loan. This current academic year, the interest rate was 2.75%, and you aren't required to begin repaying those loans until 6 months after you graduate or cease to be enrolled at least half time. Parents also have the option to apply and borrow a Parent Plus loan. This is another form of a federal loan available, but the parent does have to pass a credit check, and the parent's the primary borrower responsible for paying back the loan once the student graduates. This current academic year, the interest rate was 5.3%. With all these federal loans, the interest rates are fixed for the life of the loan. And then again, with the Parent Plus loan, you aren't required to begin repaying the loan until 6 months after the student graduates or ceases to be enrolled at least half time. There are also private loans available. So loans are a consumer choice. You are not required to take out loans. And you do have to pay back all loans once you graduate. They're not the same as grants. So these are going to have to be paid back one day. But because loans are a consumer choice, you can choose to take out alternative or private loans if you wanted to instead. So some of these loans can have pretty competitive interest rates with the federal loans, depending on how strong your credit is. So they can have variable or fixed interest rates, and a credit check is usually required for these loans. So if the student wanted to borrow loans themselves, they usually need a credit-worthy cosigner. Another form of financial assistance available is work studies. So there can be federal work study or campus work study, depending on the school you're going to. So it does give the students opportunities to work on campus and to make a little extra pocket money, maybe to put towards payments towards school or to buy their books and supplies. So each college does award federal or campus work study differently based on different criteria. So there is a question on the FAFSA that says, are you interested in being considered for work study? Just please note, selecting yes doesn't guarantee that the student's going to get a job on campus. At CLU, we don't guarantee that students are going to get on-campus jobs. The students still have to apply for the jobs, usually interview for them. And then if they do get an on-campus job, they can get federal work study or campus work study funding. Okay, so much more exciting than loans. Scholarships are available at many schools. So the kinds of scholarships available include that might come from the institution themselves, might be merit scholarships that are based off the GPA and test scores of the students. They might be based off skills or unique characteristics or the major. There might be athletic scholarships for students at D1 or D2 schools. Or other forms of scholarships. So for example, Cal Lutheran has a scholarship called the Public Price Promise. So if the student is admitted into one of our 6 UCs that's publicized on our website, so it's UC San Diego, UC Berkeley, UCSB, UC Davis, UC Irvine, and I think there's one more missing, but it's listed on our website. If you get into one of those schools, we take the average cost of attendance and award you a scholarship. That's the difference between the cost of attendance of Cal Lutheran and the cost of attendance of those 6 UCs. So it kind of helps. It's a pretty large scholarship. It's larger than all of our other academic scholarships, but this is just an example of a different type of scholarship that an institution might offer. So again, it's really important to roam those financial aid websites to make sure that you're checking for the kind of scholarships that every college has and meeting the deadlines and criteria for those. There are also a ton of outside scholarships available. We do strongly recommend you look in your hometown first to begin, especially if you're a graduating senior. That's usually a time that they have a lot of scholarships available. You can look at churches or congregations. You can look at, see if your parents' employers offer any scholarships for their employees or the dependents of their employees. So the private sources, there are some scholarship search engines that might make your search a little easier. If you go to Google and just type in college scholarships, you might be very overwhelmed. But there are search engines specifically for scholarship searching, such as fastweb.com or through Sally Mae, that helps you create a profile so you can include information about yourself. And it really narrows down the actual scholarships that you're eligible to apply for. It helps you organize them by due date, so it makes your scholarship search a little bit easier. These are some helpful websites that you may want to take a picture of or remember to look for later when you're looking at the recorded version of this presentation. So we have the link to the FAFSA application, which I saw Nick added to the chat. Also the California Dream application. If you are a Dreamer student and you want to apply to a California college, just because we're out of state, it doesn't mean that it might not be affordable. I think Cal Lutheran does a really good job of providing access and equity to our students here. So we do use the Dream application for our Dreamers and DACA students. That way we can see if you want to be eligible for institutional financial aid, in addition to any academic scholarships that we might offer you. So if you do want to look at a California school, that's the link for the California Dream application. College Board also has a ton of useful resources and information as well. And this is where you can find the CSS profile. If the institution you're applying to does require a CSS profile. Studentaid.gov is the one-stop shop for federal financial aid and information about federal grants and federal loans. This is where you'll complete the FAFSA. It's where you'll complete the loan process and keep track of how much you've borrowed in loans, how much you have to pay back, and who your loan servicer is. So there are a ton of resources on studentaid.gov, and I would definitely spend time checking out all the information that they have to offer. finaid.org is another resource for parents and students that does give you information about financial aid, but it's not in all this lingo that we use. So it provides financial aid information in lay terms for everyone. I know I probably did it. We have a habit of talking in financial aid lingo and terms that might not make any sense to you. So that it is a helpful resource as well. Okay, I just gave you all so much information about financial aid, grants, loans, applications, and I'm sure you must have a ton of questions. So we are more than happy to answer any questions you have right now. If you wanted to put any of those questions in the chat box, we do have a few minutes to answer any questions you might have about the financial aid process, types of financial aid and awards, maybe any questions about Cal Lutheran. I'm happy to answer those. So if you want to put those in the chat box, you're more than welcome to.
Just want to say the questions should definitely go in the Q&A box, not the chat box.
Oh,
so
yeah,
if you have any
sorry,
questions,
thank you.
No, you're fine. Just put them in the Q&A box and we'll be happy to answer those questions for you.
Okay, I do see one question. Why is there a cost for the CSS profile? Honestly, I don't know. We don't require a CSS profile, but I know some institutions do. Kathy, I don't know if you know why there's a cost for it, but I don't have an answer for that question. And then the next question, would it be more beneficial to start financial aid as a junior or wait to be a senior? Definitely wait until you're a senior and getting ready to approach the college application season, because even if you fill it out as a junior, your application is not going to go anywhere since you're not an admitted student anywhere. So I would wait until you're a senior getting ready to apply to colleges.
Sorry, Bree, the question about the CSS profile,
Yes.
I don't really know either, but I assume that it's because they are a private company providing that application as a service to schools who are looking for an application that provides a deeper dive into a family's financial situation in order for the school to determine what kind of financial aid should be awarded to that student from the institution. So, I mean, the amount that they charge probably on the whole is pretty small in comparison, but the schools that use the profile are generally private, higher cost institutions. There are some public schools that use it as well, but it's mostly private schools that are higher cost. And it just helps them better allocate their funds.
Thank you, Kathy. The next question we have is, are there any apps recommended to help with the scholarship search applications to not have to repeat the application process over and over again? And then I see our next question is, what are some scholarship search engines? So since that's kind of the same question, I'm putting in the chat box 2 resources that I find really helpful, FAFSA and Sallie Mae. They're definitely not the only ones. If you did want to look for scholarship search engines, we do have those on Cal Lutheran's financial aid website in our outside scholarships page. So I think if you create a profile there and put in information about yourself, it does make it easier to narrow down your scholarship search. I also recommend Sallie Mae also has webinars about how to search for scholarships and make your application process a little easier. So some things that they recommend might be just creating a folder on your desktop of maybe a personal statement, your test scores, information that you usually need to access every time that you're completing a scholarship application. So it's there and easily accessible for you to obtain as you're filling out applications. Next question is, someone told me the later you apply, the less money there is to get. Is that true? I would say no, it's not true. However, if you miss deadlines, you can become ineligible for certain forms of financial aid. Kathy, would you agree with me?
I would also say that it wouldn't be true for most federal or state financial aid. It might be true for something like the federal SEOG program, which most schools have limited funding for that. But it also might be true for some types of institutional financial aid. So that's why students are encouraged to apply as soon as they can.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And the last question we have here at the moment is, as a junior, can I still apply for outside scholarships? It depends on the organization. They usually have eligibility requirements. And so some of them might be, you must be a high school senior or currently enrolled in college. So it's important to check the eligibility requirements of the scholarships you're applying to. It is possible. It all depends on the organization and what eligibility requirements they have for their scholarship in particular. The next question, how are financial aid awards actually calculated? What are the formulas used and how are the different sources of income and assets weighed? That's a great question. I would say there are some types of some forms of financial aid, like the Pell Grant, where your EFC is what determines if you're eligible for the Pell Grant and how much you're eligible for. So just the EFC alone calculates that for you. As far as institutional aid goes, I think every school has their own calculation for how much financial aid you might be eligible for in institutional grants and the types of institutional grants you can receive. The very general answer to the question is the cost of attendance of the school minus your expected family contribution equals your student's financial need. And then every school is going to try as hard as they can to help meet the student's financial need. Some schools might be a school where they can meet full financial need of the student and provide enough grants to help meet that financial need, but some schools might not be able to. So that part on whether or not a school can meet your student's financial need is up to the school. But the general formula is cost of attendance minus your EFC or expected family contribution equals the student's financial need.
Bree, can I follow up on that?
Yes, please.
From a FAFSA perspective, when you do the application, you'll see that there are about 100 questions, give or take. And you're going to wonder, why am I answering all these questions? And the answer is that the FAFSA uses the answers to all of those questions to help calculate that expected family contribution number, that EFC. So even things as seemingly inconsequential as the number of people in the household, or the number of people in college, or the age of the older parent, all go into that calculation for the expected family contribution. It doesn't look at just the family's income and the family's assets. It looks at all of that information in determining that. So it's a very complicated formula. I could not even begin to try to explain it to you. But that's why it's important to answer every question and answer it as best as you can, because the answers can make a difference in your financial aid eligibility.
Yeah, great point. Thank you, Kathy. All right, and I know we had 45 minutes for this presentation. So I just wanted to say thank you all so much for joining us today. It really means a lot, and it's such, I'm really taken back by how many of you decided to join today and are planning for college. It's so awesome to get all this information beforehand so you can be prepared. But please feel free to reach out to our financial aid office if you have any questions. We're happy to answer.
Yes, thank you all for joining us this evening. After you finish this event, there's going to be a short survey that you'll finish up for question survey when you leave this window. Remember, there are other sessions going on this evening as well, so please sign up for those. And remember, this recording for this session will be available at strivescan.com/Cherry Creek in a couple of days. So thank you all for coming and have a wonderful evening. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.